Well, thanks so much. Great to be back in South Florida. Great to be with you here today. We've got two great pieces of legislation that we'll be talking about. I'm joined here by our Agriculture Commissioner, Wilton Simpson, our Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, Senator Ileana Garcia. Is this your district where we're at now? Yep. And Miami-Dade County Commissioner Roberto Gonzalez. So I want to thank them, and they're all going to talk about some of the things that we're doing today. Now, before I get into that, one, I just wanted to publicly say, we lost Rabbi Lipsker recently, and he was a good friend of ours for a long time. I know he meant a lot to people, not just in the Jewish community, but beyond in South Florida, and was a really great Floridian and a great American. So our condolences go out to them, yeah, for sure. And so that was sad news. On some good news, Florida once again rated #1 economy in the country by U.S. News and World Report. And that's 2 years in a row. We've also been #1 economy 2 years in a row by CNBC. We continue to be #1 for higher education. I think that's 8 or 9 years in a row. And when I became governor, we were ranked 13th overall for whatever metrics they use. And now we're up to 6 overall. And there's a variety of factors that go into that. And so we're excited about that. And, we've got a lot of great opportunities ahead of us. If you look at where we are just in terms of, say, the budget and the fiscal in Florida, since I've been governor, we've almost quadrupled the state's rainy day fund. If you look at the amount of surplus that we've carried, used to be pretty consistent. There'd be $5-6 billion in reserve. And then we've gotten that up to where we're like 20, 25 even. That we got it down from there because that was too much, and we've done some infrastructure, tax cuts, whatever. But we have really, really healthy reserves and running big surpluses. But then, at the same time, paying down an accelerated rate of our state's debt. So of 180 years, if you looked at all the debt that we've accumulated as a state, just since I've been governor, we've retired 41% of that. And when you do that early, and you got to be strategic, you don't always do it early because it depends, but if you can do it early, we've now saved each year hundreds of millions of dollars in interest costs that you would have had to bear as taxpayers. And so that's a great story. We're going to continue that. We now have the lowest per capita debt of any state in the United States. And we have the lowest number of state government workers per capita. So you talk about lean government, lean bureaucracy. We have that for sure. But with all of that, paying down debt, surplus, lean government, we've done really big things. And we've done big things for environment and natural research. You look at what we've done with Biscayne Bay, the Everglades. You look at what we've done for transportation. We obviously have the junction here in South Florida that's going to end up being very helpful. This is tougher here to help with the traffic because there's not as many options to do. But we've accelerated billions of dollars. We have projects. We just unveiled in I-4. We got all this stuff around I-4. That honestly sometimes is even worse than South Florida traffic, believe it or not. Horrible traffic sometimes, and it can be at any time of the day. And so there's been a bunch of I-4 stuff done. We've opened stuff. It's been good, but there's more that needs to be done. There's also connecting roads and bypass roads, so we're doing all. But we said, well, while we're accelerating that, let's do some temporary expansion of lanes. And so we did that 8 months ahead of schedule. And I just put out a video of that on Friday. You look at before and after, massive increase in traffic flow. But, that requires resources. And so we've done that. We've also done education. #1, we've never done more per pupil for K-12 education than we've done in this recent year. Our colleges, our colleges and universities. Our universities, we have not raised tuition 1 penny for Florida residents. And so you've got about $6,300 on average to go to these universities, and that's part of the reason we're #1 in higher education, because of affordability. So we've been able to do all of that. So that's really positive. We've got a lot of great momentum. We need to keep it going. But one of the reasons why we've been able to do all this stuff, one of the reasons our economy's #1, one of the reasons why we've added over 100,000 manufacturing jobs in Florida just since I've been governor, one of the reasons we have surplus, pay down debt, is because during COVID, we had to make a decision that people had a right to work in this state, businesses had a right to operate, and kids needed to be in school. And I know there was a lot of people down here that I had to fight with that. I remember when I said you can't fine people for masks. They were fining people for not wearing masks. And so I overrode that with an executive order and saved people a lot of money. So we did that, and the contrast between some of these states that were, I mean, look, after 6 or 8 weeks, like, you had to start to think that maybe you need to go in a different direction. Certainly after 3 or 4 months and all this stuff, but nevertheless, people really persisted in this, and it was really intolerable. And then you had the BLM riots. You had a lot of things happening. And so we were able to attract a lot of folks, businesses, individuals, you name it. People would visit Florida. It was funny, I was talking to some folks in tourism about, like, how are things going now and whatever, because you hear different things about, no international travelers, or that, the media will try to say this or that. And I don't, sometimes it's like, you can have an anecdote, but what's the truth? So I'll ask these people what's going on, and they're like, look, we're doing really well, but they're like, we will never be able to recreate 2020 to 2022, because it was just like, Florida was the place where you would go, right? I mean, I was down in the Keys recently. I remember people flooding the Keys, flooding the Panhandle, you name it. They had record years. But part of the reason, and that wasn't really the main reason we took the stand we did. Obviously, we wanted to do well economically, but we also, and even more importantly, wanted to respect people's ability to make the most of their own lives and make the appropriate decisions for themselves. And so, if you wanted your kid to go to school remote in that initial school year, 2020-21, we said, fine, but you can't demand that all schools be closed just because you don't want. And guess what? Parents wanted their kids in school overwhelmingly. We don't think that walking down the street, government has a right to tell you you must muzzle yourself and cover your face with a piece of cloth. First of all, it's not going to do anything. But second of all, it's not the appropriate role of government to be doing that. I remember, and first of all, you've seen it in South Florida, we embrace things like restaurants. Fauci hated restaurants. He thought that was like the worst thing ever. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what about all these people whose livelihoods depend on these things? And so what's happened, like, a lot of the New York restaurants moved here to South Florida. You had a big boom in that in Florida because we were very supportive of them being able to earn a living, which is something that's really, really important. We also, so that contrast was huge. That led to Florida really taking out. We would not be #1 economy had we governed like New York or Illinois during those time periods. And so that was really, really important. Obviously in education too, it's important that the kids are in school, and that will have a ripple effect for many, many decades, probably. The states, or some of these states, lock these kids out of school for a long time. Really, really harmful. So those were decisions, and I was using it's interesting, like, you'd have these governors around the country, they'd use executive orders to basically restrict. We were using executive orders to liberate, like saying local governments can't do this, local governments can't restrict, local governments can't do the mass fines or any of this stuff. And that was great, but those were kind of like emergency actions. And so we worked with the legislature, and when Wilton was Senate president, we enacted protections for people against these coercive policies. For example, no one should have to choose between a job they need and a shot that they don't want. And they were trying to fire people because of COVID jabs. We didn't allow that to happen. We also were, and I think if had Florida not taken this stand, that this may have caught fire all across the country. In early 21, people had this idea of COVID vaccine passports. So literally, if you wanted to go to a ball game or a movie theater or a restaurant, they wanted you to have to show proof of an mRNA COVID jab. And so what that does is it eliminates any informed consent, because your life is restricted based on a medical choice you made, which is really not anyone's business. But it was also even more ironic because these mRNA shots weren't preventing you from getting COVID in the first place, and it wasn't preventing you from spreading COVID. You know, it was sold as if you do the shot, you'll never get COVID and COVID will stop, but that wasn't what actually happened. So they wanted to do vaccine passports, which really would have limited the ability of a lot of our residents just to be able to make the most of their own lives. And so we were the first state in the country to pass legislation banning the use of COVID vaccine passports in our state. And not just with government, anything, it was just not an appropriate thing to do. So we viewed it as a civil rights issue. We viewed it as something that we wanted everyone to be able to participate in society. And so we got that on the books. We saved jobs as a result of the employment, not allowing employment mandates. First, they were looking at government agencies. We're like, well, obviously the state, we're not going to do it. Local fire departments, police departments, that's unacceptable. We're not going to let it. But even private businesses, this was run amok, and a lot of people would have lost their jobs. And so we saved thousands of jobs as a result of doing that. And we've also recognized bogus guidance coming from some of these exalted health authorities like the World Health Organization. You know, they want to do a lockdown treaty. We've already done legislation in Florida rejecting the WHO mandates in the state of Florida. So we really believe in informed consent. We really believe, we were also, I think, the first state to ban very dangerous gain-of-function research, which is, I mean, just think where we would be if Fauci had not run wild on gain-of-function research. I mean, it really changed the scope or the path of the country even. So, and people now have looked at that. And almost everything we did, you had the usual suspects saying, oh, this is terrible, they're not listening to experts. And now, no one would advocate for a vaccine passport. No one would advocate, well, some may, but not very persuasively, would advocate that you should lose your job over mRNA shots. No one is saying that somehow what the WHO is doing is good. Everyone has seen this now for what it is. And so, you know, that brings us here today because we're going to be talking about two pieces of legislation that I will sign. The first is SB 700. Now, there's a lot more to that, and we'll probably talk about that. The Commissioner and I will do something in the near future to highlight some of the other provisions. But what this does with respect to putting fluoride in the water supply is it basically doesn't allow that anymore in the state of Florida. It's forced medication when they're jamming fluoride into your water supply. And they did it because, you know, if you have fluoride, it'll help with dental. And I'm not saying that's not true, but we have other ways where people can get access to fluoride. When you do this in the water supply, you're taking away a choice of someone who may not want to have overexposure to fluoride. And there have been studies done, and Joe will talk about it when he comes up, that there are impacts to pregnant women, to children, about having too much of this. And you don't even have to agree with that analysis, but at the end of the day, we should all agree that we want people to be able to make informed consent, have informed consent when it comes to these things. Jamming fluoride in the water supply, irrespective of whatever for the teeth, when you can get that other ways, you know, that's impinging on other people's ability, you know, to have access to water in ways that they may not want to be exposed to what is essentially a forced medication. So the legislature was able to pass that, and we will be able to sign that. Joe Ladapo issued guidance, I guess like last year, right, late last year, about community water fluoridation due to the potential risks that were associated with exposure. And again, pregnant women and children were at most risk. That this fluoride is a naturally occurring mineral present in groundwater, fresh and saltwater, rainwater, soil, plants, and foods. But the community fluoridation adjusts the amount of fluoride in drinking water to levels that are recommended high enough so that it could deal with the tooth decay. But of course, you can get fluoride in toothpaste other ways outside of that. So what you've seen is these studies have been coming out. People are now looking more critically at this. And honestly, I think because we saw how out of whack some of these medical elites were during COVID, I think people are just much more skeptical when these elites are trying to jam anything down our throats. And so there's a lot of people that look at this and they say, okay, well, show me the evidence. The burden is on you to prove why this is a net benefit, which I think Joe would argue it's probably not in terms of health. But the highest burden is, why should this be forced on people? And it really shouldn't be forced on people. So you're seeing more and more places. You have countries where a lot of the municipalities in Europe have moved away from the forced fluoridation. Many municipalities in the United States, and a lot in Florida. I mean, we've had a number of counties that acted after Joe's guidance, but also other stuff that was happening there. So this is, I think, the things that a lot of people want to see done. They want to see protections against this. They understand there's other ways that you can get fluoride if that's something that you need. And so there have been studies that have raised concerns about physical and mental health risks that have been associated with overexposure to fluoride. Now, if you're brushing your teeth a couple times a day, that's not going to likely present the same type. But, if you're drinking a lot of water, exposed to that in the home, or that's a different story potentially. And so people just should have that information, and then they should make the appropriate adjustments. And there's nothing preventing you in your house from adding fluoride to your water. If that's what you think is good for you and your family, then you still, of course, have the ability to do that. So we don't want local governments unilaterally injecting the chemical into the water supply and exposing people to potentially harmful side effects. I know the Miami-Dade Board of Commissioners has voted, and I think they voted the right way. And so thank you. Of course, for the counties that voted the other way, we're the legislation that we'll sign is gonna answer that question anyways. But I do think that you guys led on this, and I appreciate your leadership for that. The other bill that I'll be signing is Senate Bill 56. So this was done by Senator Ileana Garcia, and it protects Floridians from geoengineering and weather modification activities. Now, people have been coming up to me. We don't do that in any of our state agencies. There's never been any permit issued from the entire modern history of Florida. We're not engaged in any of that. But people have concerns about, because you have all these people that are saying, well, the way to fight climate change is to inject this stuff and block the sun and do all that. And I'm just like, no, okay? No, we're not doing that in Florida. We're the Sunshine State. We don't need any of this now. So it wasn't being done by the state of Florida, I can tell you that. But this is something that you hear out there. It's kind of like a little cottage industry where people think that they can, solve global warming by just putting stuff into the atmosphere. So Ileana's bill really slams the door on that. Any of those efforts are dead on arrival in the state of Florida. So you don't have to worry about that going forward. And I know there was some back and forth on this bill. I know there was an attempt by the House leadership to water it down. We were concerned about what may end up happening, but I can say that this strong bill ended up passing and prevailing. So that's good. Good on Ileana for doing that and making sure that we continue to do what's right by the people of Florida. So I'm happy to be supportive of these two measures. I know that there's a lot of folks that wanted to see this done, and so here we are getting it done as usual. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Commissioner of Agriculture, Wilton Simpson.
Thank you, Governor. Florida has passed now the 2025 Farm Bill. After 7 years, it sure would be nice if the federal government would follow our lead here. I would think so. This bill is great news for agriculture, and it's great news for all Floridians. Agriculture is a national security issue. We know that to keep the free state of Florida free, we need to support agriculture. I look forward to joining you in the near future to talk about all of the great things we have done in this comprehensive bill. but today is about medical freedom. Governor, I was proud to be part of your courageous work during COVID, banning vaccine mandates, banning vaccine passports, and being co-chair of the task force to reopen the state of Florida when everyone else was shutting down their states. You have continued to fight that fight, and so have I. This Farm Bill includes many protections for our consumers. Today we announce that drinking water will hydrate, not medicate. You should not be medicated without your consent. It's plain and simple. This is one more way that we block trampling of personal liberties. There's a fundamental principle here: informed consent. If you have the right to decide what medication you take, you have the right to decide what medication your children take. That should not be a controversial idea in a free society. This provision is more than just water. It's about restoring trust in public institutions. It's about drawing a bright line between public health and personal freedom. And it's about pushing back against creeping philosophy that the government always knows best. It doesn't. We've seen too many examples in recent years where trust the experts turned into sit down, shut up, and obey. Not in Florida, not on our watch. With this legislation, we're saying loud and clear, Florida water will be clean, it will be safe, and it will be medication-free. That's how it should be, and that's how it's going to stay in Florida. From protecting parental rights to fighting back against federal overreach, Governor, thank you for your leadership. I would also like to thank President Albritton, Speaker Perez, Senator Trunow, Representatives Tuck, Alvarez, and McClure, and our partners in the Florida legislature for advancing this bill and standing up for common sense. This is what conservative leadership looks like: protecting agriculture, defending liberty, and putting the people of Florida first. Thank you, Governor, and God bless Florida.
Hello, everyone. I've been down in Miami. I was just thinking as I was sitting there listening to the commissioner, I'm like, I've been to Miami a lot lately. I've had a lot of trips down here. I love Miami. Don't love Miami traffic, and I gotta say I do like the Pinellas County, Tampa Bay area more, but it is beautiful here. It's a very special place here. And a lot of Miami's obviously a very, very special place. Some people say it's actually part of Florida. I know that there's some discussion about that, but it is a very, very special place. And I also have a lot of friends in the audience today, so that's always a pleasure. A lot of friends in the audience, so that's great. And where do we start? We start with our governor, who made all of this possible, right? Leadership by example, right? Leadership by example, leadership, that is bold in the name of truth and in the name of your convictions and what you believe is right. And that creates space for other people to do the same. It created a space for me to come here when the governor invited me to be the Surgeon General. It's created space for me to do what I think is right scientifically and based on conscience and ethical values. And it's created space for other people to also to live up to what they believe is the right thing to do. So it starts with that man right there. And I want to thank Commissioner Wilton Simpson for this agriculture bill that makes it possible for the children, the families of Florida not to have to worry about fluoridation in their water. This fluoridation is I think of Charlie Brown, and I love that. I don't know, I can't remember his name, but the little guy who holds his blanket, right? And I love it, hold your blanket. But unfortunately, he is a kid. But what we have instead, we have professionals They're doctors, dentists, public health leaders who are holding on to fluoridation like that blanket. I mean, it doesn't matter what the evidence shows, right? Whatever the studies show about potential harms in children and pregnant women, and who knows about the rest of us, they're just holding on to it. And it's okay when you're a kid, but we're grown-ups here. We're adults. We're responsible for, for the lives of other people, and we need to make good decisions. So you just, it's really cute when you're a kid, but you can't hold on to that blanket as a grown-up, okay? I mean, it's just, I don't know, you're Sue Alcalde, right? Your mayor, Sue Alcalde. I listen to the statements, and I understand she's not a scientist, and God bless everyone. I honestly, I don't really so much have a problem with people, whatever position they take on an issue, but I really want to see that you're making an honest decision, and I think that's what's important to me. And it's just like, literally, guys, with this fluoride issue, you have multiple research groups in different states and different countries finding the same things. Right? Are they all just making it up? I mean, can you actually, in a sane mind, ignore all of that evidence? You can't. You gotta let go of the blanket. It's okay. It's all right to revise your position. It's all right to do something that goes against what whatever Dr. Fauci, we're talking about him. You know how he feels about fluoridation. But it's okay to reverse your position when there's evidence. I mean, that's the right thing to do. You're in a position of leadership. You're there to serve people, and you got to serve them. And that means doing whatever's needed to serve them. And Senator Garcia, we've been exchanging communications about this weather modification issue. This was an issue that I've learned so much more about, and honestly, I am gobsmacked. I mean, there's quite a lot more to this, and we're still in the Department of Health. We're actually engaged in some work right now to study this scientifically in partnership with the Department of Environmental Protection. And we're engaged in that work, frankly, because I'm incredibly grateful for her leadership in this legislation, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to stop these activities. I don't know if it's going to be enough to stop these activities because of the experience in Tennessee when they've done something similar, although our legislation is more far-reaching, and because of the etiology of the activities, which I've learned more about. I mean, it's one of the pieces that it's kind of stunning. I mean, first of all, as the governor said, are you kidding me, right? So your plan to save us all is to release stuff like aluminum oxide and other things into the sky so that it reflects the sun back out. Like, that's your plan, and you think it will come down at some point, and we will breathe it in, right? And that's your plan to save humanity. It's completely, I mean, it's not only off kilter, but it's really, I mean, it's nuts that people think that they have a right to affect the air that you drink without your permission. I mean, the fluoride's bad enough in terms of people doing stuff without your permission, your acknowledgement, your affirmative participation. But are you kidding me? What I mean? The air that we breathe, right? That you have a right to do whatever you think is best for the air in terms of putting something into it. So it's an issue. It's an issue. And I actually want to. So one of our partners in our trips down to Miami and other parts of the city, other parts of the state, pardon me. And I want to say also, I mean, this is a shout out to all of the cities and the counties that have taken wrestled with this issue. Even if they voted the wrong way on it, I'm really appreciative of our communities, our community leaders who made this an issue that they were willing to step up and wrestle with and make a decision on instead of hiding about and not making a decision on. So that's for all of them. And in these visits, we've actually been invited often to different counties and cities. And I certainly I'm a physician. I take care of patients. I have a PhD, a doctoral degree in research science. So I'm very comfortable and familiar with science, but it helps to have an expert in an area. And I actually just want to call Dr. Mallon up. She's a University of Florida professor. She's made the trip with us to many, many parts of Florida to present some of the science. So, Dr. Mallon, would you share some words, please?
Yes. Thank you so much to Governor DeSantis and Dr. Latipo for having me here today. I'm an epidemiologist and an assistant professor at the University of Florida, as well as a clinical psychologist. And I have been conducting research on fluoride in human health for about 12 years now. I first want to say it's really been an incredible journey from speaking with Dr. Latipo at the press conference last November when he issued guidance on community fluoridation, to traveling around Florida and presenting research on health effects of fluoride exposure over the last several months. And one of the most rewarding parts of this experience has been meeting and hearing from Floridians in local communities across the state whose voices are now finally being heard on this issue. But we also saw situations like in Bartow, Florida, where, for example, where many people pleaded with their elected officials to stop adding fluoridation chemicals to their drinking water, and that didn't happen. Now with this bill, their requests will be answered. There have been major milestones in the research on fluoride and neurodevelopment over the last decade, and especially in the last year. And with more and more studies finding associations of fluoride exposure with adverse neurological outcomes, even at levels that we commonly encounter in Florida. The findings of these studies point to an imminent need for policy change, and the policy change happening in Miami-Dade today with the ultimate signing of this bill is one that will protect the brains of children in Florida from unreasonable risk of harm for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to recognize friends in the audience today. I'd like to recognize Marla Maples. Marla Maples with Global Wellness Forum. She has been instrumental in helping me understand why Florida needed to be at the forefront of this issue and how important it is globally. Also, I'd like to recognize the Popak family joining us here today. So it is a truly significant day for the state of Florida when we are taking decisive action to protect our skies, our environment, and the well-being of all Floridians. I want to express my deepest gratitude to Governor DeSantis for his unwavering support and leadership in helping this happen. Senate Bill 56, very shortly a reality. This landmark legislation sends a clear message: Florida will not stand by while unregulated activities threaten the delicate balance of our atmosphere, and there will be harsh consequences for those who do. So, Governor, forgive me, I've got to sit down because I am not feeling well.
Hey, we got you. Would you bring it up? We got you. Sugar? Yeah.
Do we have water?
I don't know.